a boycott is effective to counter
yes, it can be
genocide?
effective. It can be effective. It should be effective.
Okay.
I mean, Muslim consumers should avoid buying U.S. goods. Buy other goods. Buy Chinese detergent.
Chinese or the locals. The locals good as
Okay.
well.
You know.
Actually, in what forms is the Zionism infiltrate United States foreign policy or universities?
I wouldn't say infiltrate. Infiltrate is a kind of
soft.
bad word. What I say is that Zionists are well-organized special interest groups, just like any other special interest group, like the gun lobby or physicians or farmers or whatever. But they happen to be exceptionally well-organized.
Oh, well-organized.
Very well-organized, very well-funded, right? They work very hard. They have a coordinated plan, right? It's not just one sector. It involves universities, it involves cultural centers, it involves politics, and all levels of government, not just the federal government, but also state government and local government, right? So they work to establish ties between politicians and Israel. So, for example, they will fly, local government officials, like nobodies, mayors of small towns. They will send them
to
Israel, right, etc. So, they're allowed to do that under American law, and they take advantage of their rights under American law to build. So they've built a very powerful lobby network, right? Lots of Jewish philanthropists have given substantial sums of money to U.S. universities. A lot of U.S. universities, unfortunately, are dependent on donations from philanthropists. And so even though they should not be listening to their donors, practically speaking, they do care about what their donors say.
The donors say, right. I see.
Yes, it's not an infiltration. Everything is legal.
Illegal.
But it's a special interest.
I see.
It's a special interest. It's something that does not further the good of the entire society. And it's dangerous because it's supporting policies that are contrary to international law. Right? And right now, it's causing America, the United States, to retreat from its commitment to rule of law. So the United States has a hard time confronting Russia in the Ukraine for its invasion of Ukraine. When Israel is engaged in genocide. And the United States is making excuses for it. And the United States is trying to protect it from the International Criminal Court. So, the Zionist lobby, in some respects, is too powerful for its own good because it's undermining the values that make America a special place, right? So it's degrading the U.S. commitment to rule of law. It's preventing the United States from pursuing more direct action in this part of the world, East Asia. So in theory, the United States said that we want to pivot from the Middle East to East Asia. But how can they when they're constantly trying to prevent a war in the Middle East or having to send battleships and aircraft carriers to support Israel in its crazy wars? Right? So
I see. So the Zionist lobby is very powerful, and then so far the opposing, let's say, lobbyists, for example, pro-Palestinian
there's no
lobbyists.
Palestinian lobby.
Oh,
what
the global South
have,
or whatever.
What Palestinians have is an alliance of citizens. So the Palestinians have, speaking out for them, first of all, lots of Palestinians. But second of all, academics like myself, government, usually ex-government officials, ex-officials in the security establishment, right? And what, generally speaking, dissident officials in the U.S. government, right? Or U.S. civil service, or U.S. corporations, right? So Palestinians are relying on a much broader set of supporters.
Mhm.
Yes, Palestinians don't have an organized lobby the way the Zionists do, but there are more of them
I see. Mhm.
because Palestinian claims are just much more consistent with the values of a modern democratic state.
Mhm. Mhm.
The Palestinians aren't asking to destroy these Jews.
Mhm.
They're just asking to live in a society
together,
with them as democratic
coexistence.
citizens, right?
Mhm.
And so that's a very easy story to tell people.
Mhm.
But what the Zionists want to do is very hard to persuade people is right.
Mhm.
So instead, they threaten them. They call them anti-Semites. They try to get them fired from their jobs. They're bullies, right? And, generally speaking, people don't like bullies.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So it's a battle between a very powerful lobby
Powerful
and
lobby.
a very powerful an increasingly powerful social movement of ordinary citizens.
Social movement of ordinary citizens.
Yes.
And from wide
From a wide
of
variety of backgrounds.
backgrounds.
Right?
I see. I see.
Yeah, Professor, I sometimes in my opinions I can say that Palestinian movements, pro-Palestinian movements or Palestine in the world gets strong moral support, but Israel gets strong political support. Is it? Can we say like that, Professor?
Yes, I think that's the problem. But in a democracy, it's very hard to maintain political support once you lose the moral legitimacy of your position.
Mhm.
And this is what happened in the last 9 months, is that Israel has lost any ability to certainly uncontroversially generate moral legitimacy. Lots and lots of Americans don't think Israel is morally legitimate, particularly among younger Americans,
Mhm.
right? And the more that it pursues violence, and the more that people see that Israel has no vision for living in peace, the more Israel will lose legitimacy,
Mhm.
right? This is kind of the trap that Israel has put itself in. It has no story anymore about why it's morally legitimate. It has a story about how it can kill. It can kill very efficiently,
Very efficiently.
right? But do Americans really want to support that?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think they have a problem. Now, that doesn't mean that they won't continue doing what they're doing. They probably will, at least for a while,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
But it's hard to see how this can persist in the long term, at least as long as America is democratic.
Mhm.
If it becomes authoritarian, then it's a different
Different story.
question.
But before that, is frequently invoke the term of anti-Semitism, right?
Mhm.
If you are against Israel, you are anti-Semite. What is this concept? What and how it is applied actually?
Again, this is a sign of the desperation of Zionists. So in the last 3 or 4 years, when faced with growing campus movements,
Mhm.
creating ties of solidarity with Palestine,
Mhm.
right? Zionist groups have tried to push a particular definition of anti-Semitism
Mhm.
that includes what's called unjustified criticism of Israel.
Unjustified criticism of Israel.
And one example of unjustified criticism is an exaggerated focus on Israel. So that if you spend too
Exactly.
much time talking about Israel as opposed to China, for example, that means you're anti-Semitic.
I see.
Like you have to be equally opportunistic
Wow.
in your criticism of foreign countries. If not,
Mhm.
you're anti-Semitic. Now, the crazy thing about that is the United States doesn't give China $5 billion a year
Mhm.
for China to commit human rights abuses. It
Mhm.
does for Israel.
That's for Israel.
The United States doesn't veto countless resolutions to protect China from its own conduct in the international realm. It does for Israel. So of course Americans should focus on Israel because Americans are responsible for what Israel is doing.
Yeah.
It's not because we have a particular hatred of Jews that we focus on what Israel is doing. It's because we are responsible for it. We're writing the check, we're giving
their
the
money,
guns,
yeah.
we're giving the bombs, right? So in a sense, we're responsible for what it does in a way that we're not responsible for, what China does or for what Russia does or what Syria does or what Iran does or what, you know, warlords in Sudan do, et cetera, right? So they're trying to push these definitions of anti-Semitism that are intended to silence criticism of Israel, as opposed to a definition that focuses on the willingness of somebody to treat a Jew as an equal human being, right? So the irony is, you have certain Zionist groups being perfectly happy with right-wing groups in the United States and Europe that are anti-Semitic in the classical way.
They are anti-Semitic.
They stereotype Jews. Right. They think of Jews as foreigners. They think of Jews as dangerous, et cetera, et cetera. But because they endorse Israel, they're fine.
They're no longer anti-Semite.
Well, they could be anti-Semitic, but they're the right kind of anti-Semites.
Oh, the right.
Because they support Israel. You know, Theodor Herzl, in his book, The Jewish State, said that the biggest allies of Zionism will be the anti-Semites. Because they want to get rid of their Jews. They want to get rid of their Jews. So, of course, they're going to support a Jewish state.
I see.
So, Herzl, far from saying that endorsing a Jewish state was evidence that one wasn't an anti-Semite, he said actually anti-Semites are going to be the most eager supporters of a Jewish state.
Because they want to send
Jews from their country to that other place, right? So it's not surprising that Viktor Orban in Hungary or the leaders of Poland or etc. These right-wing leaders are very staunchly pro-Israeli because they don't want Jews in their own country.
In their own country. I see. Interesting. How about the role of, a little bit switching to the Muslim world. We have talked about the American foreign policy. The role of the what's so-called Muslim world. Even most of them are voicing pro-Palestinian cause, for example. But do they have enough ways or power to shape the politics and the conflict?
It's very disappointing. I think the response of at least the Arab countries, I don't know what all the Muslim countries have done. But, you know, for much less in the past, Arab states did a lot more. So when Israel invaded Lebanon in 1982, Egypt withdrew its ambassador. How can it be that the International Court of Justice has found that Israel is plausibly committing genocide, and you still have an ambassador in Tel Aviv? That makes zero sense, right? Yes. Same thing with Jordan, Morocco, you know, because a lot more Arab countries now have diplomatic relations with Israel. Yes. So I don't know what they're doing, to be quite honest. Maybe they're doing things behind the scenes. I have no idea. I know Egypt joined South Africa's suit before the ICJ. So that's kind of a big deal, but it doesn't make sense to me that they haven't withdrawn their ambassador. There are other things that they can do, for sure. I think there are probably other things that Muslim countries can do at the level of governments. But, you know, and then the activities of Muslim civil society are very important.
Civil society.
We talked about boycotts, right?
Yes.
The boycotts of Western multinationals like Starbucks and McDonald's have actually had a good effect. I teach business corporations. I teach corporations, so I've watched the financial news. And, you know, they have noted on the financial news programs that Starbucks and McDonald's have suffered losses because of boycotts associating them with Israel. Now, this association might not be fair, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because this genocide is made in the United States.
It's made in the United States.
It's made in the United States. I said this as an American, not proudly, but out of shame. And in a certain sense, all Americans are responsible, even those who reject it, right? So when consumers in the global market say, we are not going to buy from American companies, even if they are not directly responsible, but because we want them to pressure the U.S. government, then that's a good thing. So when Muslim consumers choose to say we are not going to spend our money buying goods from American companies, that can have an effect. And they should continue doing that. And they should make it clear that we expect Starbucks and McDonald's and these other companies to be telling Biden, what you're doing is unjustifiable. You have to stop it.
You have to.
You have to support the internationally recognized rights of Palestinians, because the world cannot afford this conflict to continue.
So in all levels, that will be pretty effective to press.
At the end of the day, sorry to say, profit is the most important thing.
Profit is the most important thing.
So when companies are
Money.
deprived of profit,
Right.
they change their behavior.
Ah,
And if enough companies feel that America's relationship with Israel is bad for their business,
for their business.
they are going to complain. So, I grew up in
I
Georgia.
see.
In Georgia, we had a system of de jure segregation against black people
Yeah,
until 1965.
1965.
I moved there in 1975, so only 10 years later. One of the big reasons why it was successfully desegregated was that Southern businessmen came to realize that if they continued this oppression of
Segregation.
black people, it would be bad for their businesses.
Ah,
So that's why consumer boycotts are very important,
I see.
because business people worry about their bottom line. And when their brand names are being associated with genocide, it's bad for business.
Right. I see.
And so it's important to be able to use whatever pressure points we have.
I see. The logic of profit economy.
Yes. So, can you say that the support from America to Israel right now doesn't have any influence to the economy, to the business?
Is it profitable for
Yes,
American businesses?
yes.
It might be for a few. So there are a few American corporations that are engaged in the weapons
Yes.
manufacture, but they're a small part of the U.S. economy.
Yes.
It's probably not beneficial for the United States as a whole. Maybe for Lockheed Martin,
Yes.
right? But is it good for McDonald's? No. Is it good for Starbucks? No. Is it good for Procter and Gamble? No. All these big American consumer products companies that have to market themselves to the whole world. It's not good for them to be associated with genocide.
So the boycott is effective to counter.
Yes, it can be
genocide.
effective. It can be
Can
effective.
be
It should be
effective.
effective.
Okay.
I mean, Muslim consumers should avoid buying U.S. goods. Buy other goods. Buy Chinese detergent.
Chinese or the locals. The locals good as
Okay.
well.
Not that
Right.
China doesn't have its own problems. China obviously has its own problems, but
Sure.
in this case,
Yes.
the United States is just really has to suffer some consequences.
Yes.
Okay, so you offer three possibilities of ending this genocide. For example, first one is genocide is what's going on right now, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, and to state solution or they are living together is probably very little possibility on that
In the
right
short
now.
term, but with the right incentives, I think it can be achieved relatively quickly.
And also hoping for Israel to giving up their exclusivity. Is that possible also through this kind of force, international law, this
I
kind
think
of
that's
things?
the only way it will happen. The only way that you will get a peace agreement is if Israel is forced to make peace.
And
Who can do it?
Well, it's got to be the global community.
global
It's got to be the
community.
global community. That's why it requires mobilization of Palestine advocates in the United States. It requires mobilization of consumers in the global South and the global
Consumers.
North. It has to be a worldwide movement, right? To just tell, in particular the United States, that enough is enough, that we insist that peace be brought about on terms consistent with Palestinian dignity and equality,
Yes.
and removing and decolonizing Palestine. And the world can't afford this conflict to continue, and we're not going to permit Israel to get away with a genocide.
Yes.
Right? And United States is going to suffer if it continues its support for Israel. And, you know, if this were to happen, I promise you, if the U.S. stopped supporting Israel, Israel's policies would change immediately. It would not take very long. Israel is completely dependent on its relationship with the United States and the European Union, right? A year or two, you know, Israel would go from having the most extreme government in its history to the most agreeable government in its history.
Yes. Because, you know, Professor, I remember when Donald Trump, when he was the president of United States, he recognized Jerusalem.
Yes.
Okay. And, you know, the Islamic countries went in Istanbul and also to ask Donald Trump to revise his political statement about Jerusalem. But,
as capital city.
Donald Trump didn't respond it at all.
Yes.
So there are more than 40 leaders of this Islamic countries met in Istanbul to give political pressure how Donald Trump to change his political statement about Jerusalem, but Donald Trump didn't respond.
Yeah.
So,
like I said, I mean, I think the way you affect the United States is to direct, you know, sanctions at U.S. businesses.
yes.
U.S. businesses,
Yes.
through businesses,
Yes.
the logic of economy.
Because you say, look, you know, we're not going to fight a war against the United States. We can't fight a war against the United States. But you know what? The next time a U.S. company is bidding on building an airport in Indonesia, we're gonna give the contract to the Chinese contractor. It's you know, and make that known.
Instead of U.S.
Yeah, and so U.S. companies will then lobby on your behalf.
Right. Yeah, just economic interest is very powerful too.
And so, but they have to be used. Whatever levers of power that forces of justice have, it has to be used, right? Even if it's weak individually, in the aggregate, it can be meaningful, right? So we shouldn't give up hope. We should just try to find the means that are available to us.
We have discussing about the external possibility to force Israel to accept the right of Palestinians, but how about the internal Israeli?
I don't think there's any hope. I don't think
No?
there's any hope
Okay.
in internal Israeli politics as it's currently structured. And as I said, it was as I said earlier in this discussion, Israeli political opinion has been shaped by 70 years of impunity.
70 years of impunity.
Israel believes that it can get away with anything. And so if that's the case, why not take everything? So all voices of reason and moderation have been sidelined in Israel because they've proven to be incorrect. The most extreme voices have proven to be correct. The most extreme voices have said, no, you're wrong. We can do whatever we want and they're not going to stop us. Right? And so that's why I don't think that right now there's any hope in the internal Israeli society. That doesn't mean I believe that they are doomed to pursue these policies. I think the United States and the West is largely responsible for making them the extremists that they are. If international law had been applied from the beginning, Israel would not be the extremist, racist state that it is today.
Okay. Anything else you want to ask?
I think it's enough.
Probably in the near future. Is there what is possible step to pursue to force Israel to accept international law?
The way I would think about it is, what can we do to put pressure on Israel's backers? Israel is hopeless.
Okay.
Israel right now is
Right,
hopeless.
it's hopeless. Hmm?
What's not hopeless is the United States, Britain, France, even Germany.
Mhm.
Is that, countries like Indonesia, civil society in places like Indonesia, need to think of creative ways of pressuring those countries
Those big countries. Mhm.
into pressuring Israel.
I see. So through pressing them economically, politically, and whatever we can,
Yeah.
then the policy might change in
Yes.
Israel.
Yet they have to understand that there is a cost for this.
The cost and consequences. All right. Thank you very much
You're very
for
welcome.
coming
Yes.
and for enlightening
Yes.
our perspective on this issue. And hopefully the genocide will stop soon.
Inshallah.
And then Palestine can be independent state again, inshallah. And yeah, the pressure from civil society, from the government in global south, north, wherever they are, hopefully powerful enough to give any effect to the big countries like United States, France, Germany, and others to stop Israel.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you. You're very welcome.
Yes, thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
Professor.
Okay.
Okay. Hopefully beneficial